Hello, any early birds? It's already on the hour and I slid in here late. My apologies. But as you get into the classroom, you can start hearing my voice. Feel free to let me know you're on board. And also, if you have any specific questions, now's the time to post them, because this will be our last Q&A session for this month-long commitment. Yay, Gloria's here. Nice to see you. Thank you. And Brenda from Missouri. Bettina's on board. Okay, we're going to have a great group. Jan's here. Just give it another minute or so folks to get in and comfortable, pull their writer brain into position to remember any last minute questions they might have or concerns or I can pretend everybody else is sleeping in this morning, which I don't blame them. Today, given, again, this is our last week, and I'm hoping that most of you have had a chance to watch the last week's lectures, etc. Any questions about writing a series, scene and sequel, and what has to be present at the end of your story? If you just feel that you got a good handle on it, go ahead and just say, fine. Gloria, when backstory for a series, is a prologue acceptable? Gloria, my answer actually is a question, because the question becomes, if it's a series, if you give it in a prologue and let's say book 3 or 4 or 7, whatever it is, and prologue should be happening sometime before the first. Before the current book is released. It should happen sometime before. If you are using the prologue as a way to tell them what happened in the previous book or the book before that or the book before that, you're trying to avoid the hard thing, which is make this book stand alone and filter that prologue in the template 3 before template 5. Remember that pros and cons, what am I going to do? Same type of situation before the midpoint of the story, template 8. What am I going to do? What am I not going to do? More of the backstory comes out there. And the next before that, black moment or climax, template 10. There's an opportunity for another, more information is given out to the reader. But do not use a prologue when it simply is, here, this was what happened in the previous book, or this is what went on, because that teaches, and I'm not saying this is you because you haven't done it, it teaches lazy writing. And you can start seeing it in some authors that you really loved, but you got deep into a series or you got deep into their books and they start just repeating what already happened. They basically write in the current story and then put this prologue, because for those who haven't read the rest of the series. But for those that have, it's like, it's one thing when you watch TV and you hear this is what's happened and you have that little 5-minute thing. That but even that means that you're not really getting into the story. So I'm glad you asked the question, because others might be tempted, particularly as they get deeper into writing a series. But no, I say it's mostly problematic. If you are writing the series and it's just to recap what's happened in the previous book or 2 books back, no, don't do it. Find a different way to get that information across. And that challenges you to up your game. So I'm glad you asked that question. Bettina, the high five moment needs to be there, even especially if ending is sad. Absolutely. There must be that sense that everything the character went through got them to that point in the story. And if there isn't that sense of high five, isn't that sense that it was worth it, that the scars and the work and the doubts and everything that they went through isn't worth it if you just skip over and just focus on the sad, or just skip over and focus on what are you setting up for the next book? And that's problematic. So there has to be some sense of, this is what commercial fiction is about, that high five, that sense that, yes, it's worth it. Even as you acknowledge that maybe all problems aren't solved, all things aren't fixed. But it's kind of like if you have a child and they get through hard period in high school or through the college years, and all they focus on is, oh my God, I lost 4 years here and I'm miserable and I hate it, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, they have no perspective on it. And as writers, that can happen, that we focus on too many other things at the end of a story. But yes, there has to be that way to go moment there, or moments. So Brenda says, seems to me sequels are actually harder to write than the original, trying to mesh the original with the current book. It can be problematic, but on the other hand, all it means is that that first book is backstory to the second book. And you included a bit of backstory in that first book, but now you've got again, template 3. The whole reason we need backstory at all is so that we understand why the character is reluctant to act or is compelled to act, even when they don't want to. That's what backstory lets us know about. You've seen movies in particular that you never do know what the backstory is. They're just kind of full grown. And who are they? You know, they are who they are right from the beginning of the book. But for readers, we want to have a little bit of an idea why this is how we get out the belief systems, is in that backstory. This is how we realize why they can work with somebody but not with somebody else, is in that backstory, or why they're hesitant to do whatever they're going to do in the book, is because they've been burned before, or they're grieving something, and that's why we need that. Robert's on board. Book 1 prologue. Max is 12 years old. That's very important there, because the story doesn't start until he's in his 20s. So that's enough of a gap. And it provides important evidence for solving a crime in Vienna Art History Museum, thereby meeting another key character, in this case, Detective Schultz, and sparking his dream of becoming a detective. Yes, find another way to convey the information. No, in that situation where we see this 12-year-old boy doing something that is way out of the ken of most 12-year-olds, what they're doing, sets him on the trajectory of his life. And it also gives him a reason to have this pseudo father figure that he trusts. So when this actual story opens, basically 12 years later, and Max is becoming a policeman and working with that detective that he admired so much. It sets it all up. This is backstory in, I think every Disney movie shows when the characters were happy or content or part of a family or something, and then tragedy struck, but it was years later that then the story opens. So in that kind of situations, yes, you can. But Gloria was asking specifically about the backstory for, if you're writing, let's say, a mystery, which she's not. And if you're writing a mystery and you're just trying to recap what happened in the previous mystery, so if people pick that up, they know what happened in the previous 3 books. So things make sense in the current book, but that's what we're trying to avoid here. So thank you for posting that example and giving an alternative to backstory anchors the reader into who the character is or something that is going to play out, such as the death of someone that's going to, and it may have happened 20 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, but it's going to play out again, and the reader doesn't necessarily even know why or how or what that connection is until much later in the book. The other question I wanted to ask of you is, do you understand, well, let me do this as a test. What is the function of a sub-story, secondaries? What is the intention of a secondary storyline in a book? Good. Okay. Robert's saying to mirror or parallel the main story with the different choices and outcomes. Absolutely. And Louise picked up on a good description of that it mirrors the plot line. That so if this character is falling in love in this story, in the secondary storyline has a character who's falling in love and has a different outcome, or was willing to work through the issues and has a good outcome. So it gives the reader a reason to understand why it's important for the main character to keep going and to keep dealing with what they're dealing with. So Christy says to compare to the primary storyline. Actually, yes, and it's that mirroring opportunity. Bettina mirrors the main lesson, but could be removed without messing up the book. And this is important, particularly if you are moving into a traditional publishing, where they have much more rigid kind of guidelines of what they want you to do, word count. So Gloria says that it provides a reason for a series, not necessarily because, Gloria, you can have it in a single title book too. So it has really nothing to do with the series, but it gives that opportunity. So again, we'll use the relationship because this is oftentimes where you see it, that the relationship in book 1 and in book 2, if you have different protagonists in that story, you bring in characters who found their love interest from a previous, and that is a mirror image of what this couple can achieve if they keep working towards it. And so that's why you think it's providing a reason for the series. So that can help other ones who are writing series, that this is the opportunity. You don't have to make up a brand new set of a couple doing something, or the brand new type of situation that to get the point across. It can be reoccurring characters who are involved in a similar situation. And this is sometimes why they have reoccurring characters who like always make the wrong business decision in a series. And it is to show that the primary one, why a main character needs to do their homework, that type of thing. And it becomes almost a running joke, but it serves a function. I tell people about, anybody know what the secondary storyline was in Pretty Woman? Most people have watched that movie at least once. Anybody know what that secondary storyline in that? I'll give you a hint. It had nothing to do with a romance. Brenda says, taking over the business. I'm glad you answered that, because that was actually the main story. That was why he was doing. Gloria says he was always tearing apart businesses. Nope, that's part of the main thing. Robert drawing a blank. Christy, she was a prostitute. Nope, that's part of the main story. Christy saying Gere giving up control. That was the main story. Gloria, business. Louise is the closest, that the other prostitute gets her life together and goes to beauty school. With the actual secondary storyline in that was the fact that Jan says the hotel, the secondary storyline, most of us never see it, because a lot of us have watched that movie on TV. It is only in a released, special edition thing that they included the secondary storyline, which is about the drug dealer who is trying to take over using Julia Roberts and her roommate and trying to get them to be part of under his umbrella. And so there's a scene in that where basically Richard Gere is driven in his fancy car with Julia Roberts to a meeting with that man who the whole part of her roommate borrowed money from this pimp, basically. But then spent that money too. So that's why Julia Roberts had to get money to pay not just for the hotel room that they had, the monthly rent, but to get enough money to pay the pimp back. And there's a scene where they drive and they meet that pimp in a dark alley, and she comes out and she gives the money to him, but he's not happy with it then. And so he makes a threat against her, and Richard Gere gets out and he stands up for her, but more so that the guy the pimp isn't intimidated by a guy in a suit. But when the chauffeur, who is a big guy, gets out, then they will, the pimp backs down. And as Chrissy points out, never saw that version. I never saw that version. I was analyzing the movie. I did not know that there was this whole section because most of us did not see it. So that's how you use a secondary storyline. So when you see an extended version at some point, don't worry about it, because it really didn't add to the story in a lot of ways. It was more like another scene that showed Richard Gere stood up for her, which she was not used to, and how they got the pimp to back down. But it really did not impact the main storyline, which was her being a prostitute, never planning on being a prostitute, but just kind of settling into it and getting trapped in it. And Richard Gere with his back and drove him was business because of his relationship with father. That was all part of the primary storyline. You can't cut that part out. So the only reason I shared that was not to put you on the spot, but to, as a great example of, oftentimes we don't even know what a secondary storyline, particularly if something has been released as a movie and then we see it on TV and it's like, but they skipped all this part. Well, that part was the secondary storyline. So you see that sometimes with Finding Nemo, the whole Nemo himself, the younger fish in the dentist office in Australia. A lot of times that is cut out and it only shows Nemo, Marlin getting to him and trying to save him, but you do not see where the other fish, father figure, boy, that's a bad one. Sometimes you never even see it on the TV version or shorter version of the movie, and that father figure in the fish actually encouraged Nemo to try and escape, that nearly killed him, which he realized his father may be a pain in the backside, but at least he loved him enough to try and protect him and try to do the best thing for him. And so that was the lesson that Nemo learned there. Okay, other questions here that you might have? Tina says, you can't cut out the aquarium part. That's where the My Bubbles fish is. Well, when they take that into account, they do keep it in place. But oftentimes, particularly when movies were longer than a designated hour, that's where they would, Jan likes the shark bait cuteness. That wasn't actually in the aquarium, but so that is usually retained about who you can trust and who you can't trust. I want to share something else with you. Someone says, do you have a cat? My cat just came running to me. Yes, we have a cat. A new kitten. I call it the Antichrist, because if it's not clawing up your clothes, it's clawing your face. It is in cat jail right now, and Tech Guy said he would come and save it from cat jail and bring it out to Tech Guy's office, and that's really quite a willingness to go above and beyond, because Tech Guy took 5 years of desensitizing shots to get ready for our old cat, but the cat died the week before the shots ended. Plus, he always thought, Tech Guy did, that the cat should have got the shots, not him. But he still reacts to cats. So for him to go in and take care of the cat. So the kitty cat will quiet down. The Antichrist, the domestic terrorist, will be quiet. And see, he was probably just screaming to your cat, Louise, to let him know that someone needed to come and release him from jail. Christy says, Tech Guy is awesome. Absolutely. I've trained him for years, and super patient, also lots of training. Jan said, our son's dog had a sleepover last night, and he and Puppy played, so we didn't sleep last night. Understatement. Now, I wanted to remind everyone that these live Q&A sessions for a month or so, or whenever Tech Guy gets around to it, he will consolidate these and put them into the classroom, so you only have to go to one place to see all the replays about all the lectures and the handouts, et cetera, et cetera. And you get those forever. You don't get them for a month. You get them next year and the year after that, and moving forward. So take advantage of that. We covered a lot of information in this month, and you're all at different places in your writing career. So what you needed to learn, for some, you're going to expand your knowledge and your comfort level about what it means to be a writer, and have an opportunity to pick up on some things that you may not have picked up in this go around. So you will have all that material. The Facebook group will stay in place. It just won't be active. In the future, we're trying to make it so that the next class can come back to the same classroom, but it's been so problematic with the changes Facebook is making that I don't know what we're going to do about that, simply because trying to find people's postings has been really challenging. So, but it's there, it's yours. If you have any questions about it, or lost your password, or forgot what buttons you need to push, that's what Tech Guy is here for. So you can either send me and I just pass it on to him, or you can send to him directly at my assistant email. He'll get the email either way. So that is to let you know that the live class stops, the learning curve doesn't stop. Okay? And I've got to say, this has been an amazing group for your willingness to challenge yourself. And that's very important to know. Robert says, techguy@marybuckham.com. He wishes, we're not going to give that much credit, but just assistant@marybuckham.com. We'll get it, or just send it to me, mary@marybuckham.com, and I'll get it to him. So, let me see. Robert's asking, prologue is 2,700 words, too long, about right. All right, 250 words. So that's about the average wordage on a traditional page with the formatting and the double spacing and so 250. So you're looking at slightly 11 to 12 pages. Given the length of your story, that can work. But if you have a 65,000 word story, having that much might be too much, simply because the reader wants to get into the current story. And they know that this is going to impact it, but it's like meeting someone for the first time. And your best friend says, well, let me tell you about who you're going to meet, and then talks for 2 or 3 hours. And it's like, let me at least meet them and make my own impressions, and then your explanation can help clarify. So it's always a kind of a catch-22 there. Gloria says, scene and sequel, easiest way to chart it out. The easiest way to chart it out is simply the document that you were given that has basically scene is 3 elements, sequel is 3 elements. That's the easiest way. And to look at, if you're analyzing someone else's book, know that the story very rarely starts on a scene. It just starts with them in their everyday world, and the inciting incident gives the reader a rough idea of the direction that the story is going to go. So from the inciting incident on, you pick out where you know exactly that this is a scene. Where is the goal clear here? The goal might be, I'm going to avoid this issue. I'm going to ignore that summons. I'm going to try for a different job, whatever it is. And that gives you the hint of where a scene starts in that book that you're reading. And then you have the next thing. What happens? Conflict. Okay, what kind of conflict? As you're going through, and you can see, once you know what you're looking for, this is conflict. This is this argument with someone's parental unit. This is the road is closed. They can't go through it. The whatever is the problem. And then what is the disaster? And figure out, how did that writer write? The disaster was they're late for the meeting, something came up, there was an accident, whatever it is. And then you can start seeing that particularly early in the story, these types of conflicts and disasters are probably going to be a lot less than later in the story as you get deeper. So use that single page handout. Christy says, having the materials won't be as helpful as having your insightful responses to our homework. Thank you very much for that. But also be aware that I am one person, last time I checked, I am one person giving you feedback based on my experience of what I've seen. And what you want with your career, whether it's one book or multiple books, it is all up to you. You, each one of you, have you're going to be given 1,000 reasons to stop all the way along. And there's only one reason you won't stop. And that's because you're unwilling to stop until you get what you want out of this. Doesn't mean you might end up oftentimes people say, oh, say, what do you want? And they'll say, I want to be a New York Times author. And it's like, whoa, do you have even any idea what that means? And the type of dedication to the craft, to the work, to the books, to going back to the drafting board and working and reworking and reworking. New York Times authors don't get there by mistake. They get because they're willing to do, not give up. So, but even just being published is a goal. Now, the challenge with getting published is oftentimes people think that's an end goal. But it's not, it's a means goal. And the end goal is like, I want to make a touchdown playing football. And that's not soccer for those not in the US, but in football, you go down the field and down the field and down the field till you get to make a touchdown. But that's not winning the game. You can still lose the game. Because oftentimes when you get published, it's like, hallelujah, I did it. And it's good to celebrate. But it's also important to realize now it gets harder. Now is where it gets more challenging because you've put years into this book, and oftentimes they want the next book out. In a traditional publishing where they give you more breathing room, they want it within a year. And doing indie publishing, they want it within 3 months, the next book. So be prepared. If I give you feedback or gave you feedback that said, how about this? Or this might be what you're missing. It wasn't me saying no. If I gave you feedback that said, this is problematic, and this is why. I can't stop you. I should not be able to stop any one of you. But there are times that you need to hear what's not there yet. And this is, I have a good friend who worked very closely with a number of New York Times authors. And she said something years ago that has stuck with me. And it is yours to lose. Meaning you get to the point that you're published, you get to the point that you're getting awards, you get to the point that you might hit the USA Today list or the New York Times list. It is always yours to lose. So the whole process that you're going through is about learning the lessons that are most important to you, just like in our novels. For some people, it is learning that to stand up and say, I'm not going to let your feedback stop me, and keep going. For other people, it's learning that you are going to get no's along the way. It doesn't mean no, you can't write, or no, you should stop writing. It's you're going to get those. There is not a published author out there who hasn't got those. And I'm not just talking about rejections. I'm talking about a deadline that's at the same time that your spouse has a brain tumor, or that your child has run away from school or home and you don't know where they are, and yet you're supposed to stand up and accept an award for your writing. These things happen. And so your lesson might be, how do you continue when your world blows up? And there is no easy trajectory. Those who have got published are the ones who have clawed and stayed and worked and done exactly what you've done by being here and learning from someone who's not going to sugarcoat and just pat you on the head. There's a lot of writers, instructors out there that's what they do. And people love it without even realizing that's what they love about it, is they love that, yes, way to go. When I tell you way to go, it's because you've earned it, because you've shown the work. And you can see that in the feedback on the Facebook group. I have not said to anyone right up front, oh, perfect, you got a pat, 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 pat on the head. No, I'm the bitch slap person who will say, almost. And here's how you can get it, because that's what I want you to learn. It doesn't matter if you get it first time around. It matters that you keep trying. And I used to have a picture, but I draw so horribly. So think of a stick figure. And the stick figure is surrounded by a circle. That's where you were at when you came into the class. Some of you have been through this particular workshop in a different reiteration, but you came into a class at this level of what you understood about your writing, what you understood about the business of being a writer, etc. And over the course of just 4 weeks, plus, depending on when you got in and were able to access the pre-work, your circle has become bigger. Make the circle kind of hard with just 2 hands, but do you see? And this is what happens when you're challenged. You either meet the challenge and expand your learning, your understanding, your craft. Are you going to be able to perfectly plot a novel out after the course? You learn to do something the more times you repeat it. This is education, early years in particular, is you learn how to make the difference between a B and a P by writing them over and over and over again. And you keep practicing, you keep practicing, and you keep practicing. And you do it with the multiplication tables, or you do it with whatever, until it becomes second nature. Most of us don't get that opportunity to do that with plotting. So we may write 1 book a year, or maybe 2 books a year. We may be able to plot out 3, but we don't moving forward. But the thing is, you have the roadmap. You've been along the process once. You've had me in your head, and I'm sorry about that, but you've had me in your head saying, almost, not quite, remember this. Don't use too many words because it can muddy the water. Focus in on the main plot, not the secondary, not the subplots, not everything else. Just get this one down. You get that one down, you got it. Because then if you want a subplot, you go in with not as many templates, but you might, for the villain, have template 1 through 5. Or just skip 1, 5, 8. And that's because we're not going to spend as much page space on them. But to understand them, you could get by with just understanding template A and B of a secondary character who's going to play out. So use the tools and trust what you have learned. Trust that, you know, that circle of yours is going to keep expanding. Yeah, Christy says, I'm pretty overwhelmed. You'd be a fool not to be overwhelmed. And that is, it's like going to your first year of college and you take all of it in 1 month. It is overwhelming, but overwhelming is simply an emotional response. It's not reality necessarily. It is simply, Christy, you have to deal with health issues on top of trying what you're doing. So think about the poor people like Jan, who's been through it before, and she got everything that we did here in 3 days. So that's also overwhelming. It is, but it doesn't, that again is just an emotional response to the stress, the being tired, the not getting as much done as you wanted to get done, or getting feedback that you didn't want to hear necessarily. But it doesn't have to stop anyone. Robert wants to know if we can continue to post on the Facebook. Absolutely, if you want to. I won't be checking in, but go ahead. Jan has a question. Is it best to have 3 books ready when querying an agent? You don't have to have the magic 3 number. You can have the first book and the second book almost finished. Usually when querying an agent, particularly with one of the bigger houses, it's going to take a while to get the response back for them. 6 months in a year is a good response time anymore. And that way you've got the second book done, you've started the third. So if they come back then in a year and say, no, no thanks, you're not behind. I would recommend querying the top 3 agents you might want to consider. In the meantime, join contests where you can get in front of an editor that you want. And this is what, if you get an editor to read your book and give you feedback, that means you're this close to being traditionally published. They do not have the time to give that kind of feedback. Not interested at this time, or not this, not that, just didn't get into your character type of response. That's not. But if they give you something with, I had this concern about it and that concern and this concern, that's a high 5 day, because that means it's right around the corner. So it is, you work it and then you resubmit and say, and do it quickly rather than months or years down the road. Get the revisions done and say in your thank you letter to them, which is also strategic, but also they send out that type of feedback and they never hear back from somebody. And it's like, why did they take the time? Why did they bother? So simply by saying, thank you. I'm working on the feedback. May I resubmit? And say them within the month or something. That keeps that door open. Robert says, I feel like my goal is to make a first down and not commit a turnover, not even to the touchdown point. And Robert, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. You are so much further along than you realize. You have books finished. What is the number? It's in the 90th percentile of people who want to write a book and they never finish it. So just finishing the book is amazing. So trust me, you're further along than you realize. So keep going, keep doing what you've been doing. Bettina asked a great question. Why is indie publishing a tighter deadline if we're doing everything? It's a tighter deadline because indie publishers have taught the reader that they can write faster. As long as it was only traditional publishing, readers were trained to have to wait a year. But the indie writers have proven I can write this book and get the next one out in 3 months, and get the next one out in 3 months. Once you've done that third book for them, they're usually hooked. So you might have a little more room, but it's simply readers' expectation. It's like going to a fast food restaurant. What do we expect from a fast food? Guess what? It's fast. Have you ever sat in line or the drive-in part or something, gone in and it's taken, oh my God, 10 minutes or 15, like 20 minutes, you're calling the manager and doing a Karen on them, except for Robert. Because our expectations have changed. So it is what the reader wants. And the reader wants to binge read, just like they're binge watching TV. And a lot of things have changed because of that. So you changed to meet your reader's expectations. And the whole purpose of doing 3 in a row, I don't believe in this. You can do it 12 books in 12 months. Yes, technically you can, but you're starting to throw crap out there and hoping it sticks. I think you owe yourself and you owe your readers more than just same story regurgitated. There are some subgenres, though, people don't care. So it's your standard too that you're trying to keep up with. Jan says, because we don't want to submit crap to an agent that we really want to represent us, we want our book to be the best it can be. Absolutely. And that's where it makes a difference. In the traditional publishing world, pre-indie publishing, when an editor and agent accepts a book, they didn't know how long it took you to write that. Could have taken 12 years, could have taken 15, could have taken 20. So they do not want to give it to an editor before they can be reassured that you can replicate the process and not last forever. Someone like J.R.R., and of course it's going to space me out. He's the one who did the J.R.R. What, honey? I can't hear you.
or Game of Thrones?
Yes, Game of Thrones. Good, now I feel better. Tech guy forgot his name too. He was trying to tell me it was GRR. He was telling me it was Tolkien, it wasn't. But the point there is, oh boy, I got a lot more questions here. Not Tolkien. Tolkien is J-R-R. This guy is GRR, and he did Game of Thrones. It wasn't until like his 6th novel, and he wrote big. He wrote 160,000 was a short story for him to write. But that last one took almost 3 years for him to write. And he had a lot of grief from people saying, you've told us it's coming, you told us it's coming. So it happens that whatever reason he had to deal with, he had to deal with it. Jan says, I was director in a healthcare education program. Our role was 8 times praxis. It became muscle memory, and you could perform the task with a patient. 8 times was the charm. And that's the same in the advertising world, where it used to be, you heard a name 3 times, you usually remembered it. Now we're deluged with so much information from so many different directions. It was 14 times in a while, and then it went up to 21 times. So this has to do with marketing. Just because someone says, read this book by Robert Harrell, I'm not going to remember it simply because, well, I would now because I've seen your name enough over a month, but not necessarily on a regular basis. So that's why they recommend editors and agents, the social media, etc., so you can start having a following that isn't just pronouncing your name, but have a sense of who you are or what you are. Brenda, how do you find these editors in contest? Louise has a great thing. Join a writers group where they have contests. Yes, but you can also, Writer's Digest always has a listing, and I think they have they used to put out the Writer's Digest directory that actually gave you, before the world upended here the last couple of years and everything went candy-wampus, they give you kind of a month-to-month list of different courses or different contests that will be coming up. And are they open to people outside of the genre? Meaning, if you're not a member of CRW, MWA, Sisters in Crime, the Guppies, if you're not a part of the group, some of them are not open to you. So Writer's Digest, the magazine, still probably has one of the most updated. And you can also Google that information now and basically say, contest for mystery writers, contest for mystery writers, female sleuth, contest for mystery writers, law enforcement stories, that type of stuff. Robert tells me guys do it, Kevin. Oh, all right, now I know. Louise says, in Colorado, we have Rocky Mountain fiction writers, the Colorado romance writers, Heart of Denver romance writers, etc. So there can be a lot of options depending on where you live. In Brenda, in Columbia, Missouri, they have a big Missouri writers organization that usually has a conference once a year. And in the conference, oftentimes, if you go to a regional type of conference or a national conference, you can meet directly with an editor or an agent many times. You have to set it up, you have to have a pitch ready for them. But it is, I will see what that name of that group is, but I was very impressed. I think I came to talk to them twice. Once I was a keynote and once I was just a presenter of a workshop. I will find that and I will send it to you. But I know that it usually takes place in Columbia and it's writers throughout. There's also another writers group that I give workshops for online fairly regularly, or have in the past, and I'll see if I can find that name for you too. So it's a lead. Yes, Brendan knew it was Martin. Jan says, follow an agents and editors' social media too, and sometimes they quick pitch. They have quick pitches and contests, and they do that. I see it multiple times on Twitter. Someone will say, okay, have a story ready with your pitch. I'll take pitches for the next 30 minutes. But this lets you know not only that, but it also lets you know things such as they may say, I want mysteries. And then you look, and every person that they represent, none of them are mystery writers. So it gives you more than just one facet of information. Following them on social media is invaluable, and also reading their interviews. Jen says award-winning blogs are always good to follow. Yes. Louise, did you post how to write a synopsis using the templates? I'm so glad you asked. Basically, to write a template, you do like template A and B to understand who your character is and what their conflict is. And then all you need to do in a synopsis, they do not want all the details. They want literally what happens at the beginning of the story. That includes, so-and-so is an everyday Joe, and they are happy where they're at until they're asked to go to their dying ex-wife's bedside. Okay, that's inciting incident and opening of the story. Then you jump to template 5. So what action do they take there? Now, he may hesitate, he may not hesitate, and this is where you give a little bit of his belief system. Because Joe Schmo has a lot of unresolved issues, he's not sure he's the best guy to be at her bedside, but he's willing to do that. Okay, that's template 5. Depending on the length of the synopsis, it can be all in one page, it can be up to a couple of pages. But the more detail you give, the more reasons you've given somebody to say no to a project. So template 1, how does the story open, and what is he asked to do or she asked to do? What happens a quarter of the way into the story? And you don't write it what happens a quarter of the way in the story. You just lead from the opening to that quarter, and then in the midpoint of the story, he gets there, but she died right before he arrived. And he learns that she has a child that was his. Okay, that's everything gets blown up there in the middle of the story. So then the climax of the story is he has to learn that communicating and emotions, all those things that he was reluctant to do in this marriage, is what created a large part of the dissolution of it. And he missed out on 8 years of his child's life, but he has a child now and responsibility to do, and then the resolution. So he takes his 8-year-old child home with him, or 7.5-year-old child, and now has another chance. There's a whole synopsis. Okay, so those 5 points of your story is what they want to know about, and you don't have to do more of that. This is why I've always, in this class, less can be more, because the biggest mistake that people do with writing synopses is try to spend most of the synopsis just on the opening of the story, because that's the part that the writer knows most, but forget to tell the end of the story, which is what that editor or agent needs to see. Robert says, authors with an S, publish.com, sends out emails with lists of publishers and other entities accepting manuscripts in various formats and genres. Always pay attention, though. Do your homework. Find out who are what you want. You want anyone who will take you? That's not a good sign. Do you want someone at a big house, one of the big, it's going to be a little bit harder to break in, but you can do it. So don't just send out something because something online said, I'm accepting and will review these, because you don't know if you're sending it to the garbage collector or to someone who legitimately is an agent or an editor and will fight for your book as hard as you'll fight for it. Same, Jan says, C. Hope Clark, capital C, then the word hope, and then Clark. Has a great newsletter, free and paid, that lists contests, publishing offers, freelance writing opportunities, etc. Kitty says, inciting incident in template 5. That's 2 points. You said 5 points. Okay, I said template 1, opening story, and include the inciting incident. Template 5, template 8, midpoint of the story. Template 10, black moment, what do they really have to face, and a hint of what happened in the resolution. So those are the 5. Kind of like what we did in the free plot your novel. We just focused on those 5 points in the story. Bettina, can we negotiate with traditional publishers to reserve the right to self-publish sequels if they don't want them, so we're not fighting over rights later? You can, but this is, again, how bad you want that particular publisher, because this is where they make their money, is in the sequels. So you may want to say the next 3 are yours, that you can give them that much. And then they can, it's a negotiation. Sometimes they'll say yes, sometimes they'll say no. We need everything you've written on this character. So this, again, it's a business relationship. What is it they want? Well, they want to make money out of you. And oftentimes they don't get it after the first book, or second, or even the third. That's where it starts to take off. So if you negotiated that you're not going to give them anything, it puts them in a tenable position. Why should they invest in you initially? So it's all a trade-off and something to be aware of. Jan says, you can have an attorney review contracts for you. Absolutely. And an attorney oftentimes can say that it's an attorney with experience in writing career. And again, you can oftentimes find that information just by researching online, recommendations, and then look at their record type of thing, who are fighting. Some writing organizations oftentimes will offer limited attorney services. It doesn't take very long to find someone by word of mouth and then ask, okay, so-and-so said, well, I think Marjorie Filtry is a great attorney. Don't stop the research there. It's like someone saying, I had a great car and it wasn't a clunker, and the next person says, I had that car and it was a clunker. Okay, now you get to know why is it you do research on that. So you can move from that point forward. But again, in dealing with any business who is in the business to make money, which at one time, a lot more of the publishing houses were in the business because they loved writing, but that's not the case as much. You can find the exception to that. But be aware that they are going to try and get what they need. And they will have areas that are negotiable, and they'll have areas that are not negotiable. But thinking about it, you know, you may want to put a time frame on it. So within 10 years, you can have this, but at that point, we renegotiate. Or Christy says, remember, each person you add to the mix takes more of your profit. Having said that, I am an attorney, and it's probably a good idea to check with one before signing a contract. Absolutely. Now, it's upfront cost, but it is also peace of mind. And I know that when I first started out, the first book I wrote for the publisher, and then I wanted to write for a different line in the publisher, they will not give me my rights back to those because I signed the standard, because I assumed I was going to be writing with them for a number of years, but then a lot of things changed. So I still can't get those back. And you find that too with authors who have made a name for themselves, and then they find out that they're early publishing, putting out a book without any input and changes to them. So all of a sudden these books are being released as if they're new books by this person, and you are going to find out that they are publishing a book where nobody has a cell phone and a character is still smoking and all sorts of other things. So the higher you get in your career, the more power you get, but you're also going to deal with more people who want to benefit from that, not necessarily for your sake. Jan says, are short stories published in Chicken Soup for the Soul worth mentioning as writing credits for Query Letter? Absolutely, because you met a deadline. You probably met being edited. These are the types of things that people are looking for with those type of things. So writing a blog can give you credentials for the fact that a blog with 20 people following it and 15 are family members, maybe not so much, but a blog that has a subscription of hundreds of people, yes. That means that people are liking your writing. So that can be a writing. But writing for the church newsletter per se doesn't always mean that you've met deadlines or have been edited. And that's what they're trying to verify. Are you a professional? Can you act like a professional? So getting published in anything like Chicken Soup for the Soul, or an anthology, are a good thing. Bettina says, can we mention writing contests like AutoCrit ones in a query letter? If the contest is something that is nationally recognized and that this particular editor or agent might recognize. So if you're querying for, like, let's say sci-fi or fantasy, and you reference a contest that you finaled in, but it was only for mystery writers, it probably won't mean anything. But it's not going to hurt necessarily. But don't fill your query letter too much with, and my mother loved it in 3rd grade when I wrote this. And I'm not joking about this because I have seen these query letters. Make it as relevant and as professional as possible. So yes, if you finaled in contests that are, let's say you're a member of Southern Writers of California. I don't even know if there's a group called that. But if you've finaled in their contest for 5 years in a row, what the editor or agent is seeing is, I have never heard of this contest, and are they finally in it because the group only has 15 members, and if you enter, basically you're calling, they always got place in a row of 5 every year, but it's just because everybody got points just for entering. So be aware of what you are. If you say, I have been a member of whatever that group I just made up, Southern California Writers Group, for 10 years, I've finaled in their contest for 5 years. All they're going to do is going to put those two things together, and it's going to decrease what is professional. Louise, I would include that I'm published in nonfiction. Absolutely. Because you met deadlines, you got, your writing had to pass certain levels to get it. You probably had to do promotion of some sort with it. Absolutely. So it doesn't have to be just fiction. If you are going from one genre to another genre, you're published in young adult historical, and now you're moving to adult mysteries, then you are going to be, that's possible because they're both commercial fiction, so that can still work. Louise says, I have come to appreciate the process of plotting as a pantser. Okay, I'm glad, because it shows you, and in your case, you recognized with the templates, and I try to make sure I said it multiple times, you don't have to fill out every question. I want it to work for you. You just have to be aware that these areas of your story exist, and they exist for a reason. Then you can be a pantser. So understanding ahead of time as much as you need, but not too much, is the secret. So you come from a pantser, because most of us do. That's when we're starting, that's what we do. But if you're finding that you're writing, and I know individuals who are writing 120,000 words and then love the revision process all the way, and so they can get it down to 65,000. And you got to find out what works for you, and that's what's important. Okay, Christy's saying, I'm published in legal anthologies. That would not count. Yes, it is. It would count, because you were published. You met a deadline. You got revision. Jan 2, I have medical technical writing. That means you have gone through the process. You're accepted as being qualified to be in that, to have credentials enough to be accepted. You went through an editing process where somebody did not pat you on the head and say, okay, I'll take it just because you wrote it. And you have projects out there. So yeah, there's nothing that says only if you write in cat anthologies, but not dog anthologies. No, it all matters. And anthologies actually are a great way in commercial fiction to get into, if you don't yet have a novel, because by getting into an anthology, you learn from the other writers in the anthology. How do they promote that book? How do they get it out? What worked, what didn't work, what would you have done different? Why did they let the big name draws in the anthology write 50,000 words and the not so big names only write 25,000 words? There's all sorts of things to learn, because it's a process and you're in the game and working toward that process. So anthologies oftentimes, I've seen a number of people with brilliant writers. They're just so good. And the only way they could break into a traditional publisher was they had 3 or 4 friends that invited them to join this anthology. And they got in the anthology with that publisher, which made it so much easier for the publisher to then look at a full-length novel from them. Before then, they wouldn't even look at that novel. So again, that goes back to my earlier comment. Find how much getting, being, or staying published matters to you. It's a game. I know it matters to us. It matters a whole lot. But no one can stop you if you do not allow your stopping yourself. Everyone who is committed to this course you've taken a step that others don't commit to for a lot of different reasons. But you've taken a step that said, I'm willing to back what I want with more experience and getting feedback. And again, you're not going to get personal feedback from a lot of courses anymore because publishers have made it problematic. They will not allow their writers to give feedback to other people because if other people, one of you, let's say, had a story and it had Kevin and Karen in the story, and then 5 years from now, I write a story and there's a Karen and a Kevin in that story. And if you were of the sort that would come back and say, it's your fault, I didn't get that story published and you must have stolen it from me. Even if it's not true, it still means time and energy and emotional angst to have me deal with your lawsuit. And yes, it happens. We're in a very litigious society, and we have a lot of people who feel entitled to get what they want without doing anything more than just, I'm a writer, thus I should be published. And so there's pros and there's cons, just like in our story. There's going to be challenging times as a writer, and there's going to be amazing times, amazing readers, and amazing opportunities for you. And it's just around the corner. So keep writing. Keep reinforcing your wins, your capabilities, and the fact, I think everybody deserves a medal. I survived a Mary Buckham course. And I'm not in the closet sucking my kneecap yet. I'm waiting until she turns around, then I'm going to do that. Because I'm not an easy teacher, but I'm a committed one. And I'm committed to helping you learn, not just when it works, but how to tweak when it doesn't work or what you might be missing. And also, I am human. Don't tell my kids. I've told them long before that I'm not. They believe me. I can make mistakes too. All right? I may not have understood what you've said in a particular answer, and that's all it is. But don't let anybody, don't let an instructor, an editor, an agent, contest, don't let anybody stop you. This is, if it matters to you, you'll keep going, okay? That's what's important. There's going to be those up days, there's going to be the down days. And I'll tell you an example based on personal experience, then I'll let you go because I know I've taken longer today. But there's a day I received 2 letters. First letter was from a agent that I really admired, and she agreed to read something, and I sent it off to her, and it was a story set in New York City. And she was from New York herself. And she sent me back a scathing response that basically said, why do you even think you can write? This is so inaccurate. This is not New York. Do your homework. If you're not going to do your homework, stop writing. It was cruel. It taught me, one, I would not have wanted her because she was not giving me feedback. She was just being her bonnet about Brooklyn or something. But anyway, it was like just getting slapped, not a bitch slap. This is like a smack. And I remember leaving my house and I went for a walk and it was like, okay, that's it. I'm giving up. Enough. I'm done. I'd had multiple books that I've written, not published, but multiple books. And it just hit me. So I went for this walk, got it out of my system, and walked a little bit further. And then what happened is I was thinking, well, I wonder if I changed that. Or maybe this would work here better. Because when you're a writer, that's what you do. The stories don't stop just because you want to. The stories keep knocking on you and knocking. Pretty soon they get quieter and quieter and quieter. The good news is that by the time I got home and was human again, I decided to open the other letter. That one actually was from an editor in New York who said, I love this story. Send me the full manuscript. I can't wait to read it. So that is, I sent it to her. Unfortunately, the story was set in New York and it involved a terrorist activity, and the editor actually had a room that looked out towards the towers on 9/11. So I sent her a letter and said, I do not read this manuscript. It's it might be too painful to read. So I'm withdrawing it. I appreciate your help, and if I get back to another manuscript, I will. But the point was, two different opinions. One loved it, one hated it. They were both New Yorkers. All you need is one yes to keep going. Jen said I had a job like that where my supervisor told me I must have gone to college where I bought my master's degree. To this day, I'm still proving I was wrong. And that's what those kind of letters can allow you. There's a gift in everything that you get. And that's the gift that Jan got, and that's the gift I got from that agent. It's like, I'd rather have the letter from the editor because they're who are going to publish it rather than this editor. And I've been saved from really singing the praises of this particular editor or ever considering that person as an editor because of their response. I learned that ahead of time. And that's the win, is that look for that silver lining because it's there. You might have to give yourself time. Chocolate, ice cream, and red wine can be our friends when we need it. And I have no doubt that everyone in this class who has posted, who has shared, who has gone back again and again to reconsider, have that possibility of publication. Gloria says the wins are out there. My win has been the quality of the stories in this class has been outstanding. And I don't get to say that on a regular basis. But I want you to go forth, keep writing. I will be answering homework until 6 p.m. this evening. There might be a break there for lunch or something. But if you haven't posted something yet, or don't just throw stuff out there, but give it your best shot, and I will be responding. So thank you all for being here. It's been an honor to work with you, and I mean that. So take care, have fun with your writing, and know you are in charge of your career. How much does it matter, and how hard are you willing to work? And I know you're willing to work hard because you took this course. So thank you very, very much. And I will see you down the road. And also feel free to continue posting in the Facebook group if other people want to give you feedback, or if you want to give feedback to others. So all the best.